kiss for you.
Today we're looking at insane, ridiculous naming schemes, and this is kind of a sequel video to the video I did on why tech tends to be so complicated. In that video I basically talked about why the technology products and the naming and stuff tends to be so ridiculous, and it's because a lot of the information that the engineering and the technical department get does not align with what the marketing decides. You may think it's something else, but I can basically prove that it tends to be a miscommunication between the fronts rather than a intentional design. Malicious design. So for a great example, Dell, in their infinite wisdom, decided to redo their line. Before this, they had stuff like the XPS line, they had the Latitude line, they had Inspiron, and they had the Pro line, or the rugged line, and those were their four models. And you could basically figure out the Inspiron's like the cheap model, and the Latitude's like the more business-focused one. The Pro was like the super rugged one for like really high-end stuff. XPS was like the Ultrabook, competing with like the MacBook Pro. And that was basically your four sections. Obviously, however, they decided to change all that. And instead, we now have Dell, Dell Pro, and Dell Pro Max. A lot of people have kind of said, okay, Dell, this is like the Inspiron. Right, sorry, this isn't black, but this is the Inspiron. The Dell Pro line is kind of like your Latitude line. And your Dell Pro Max line is most likely your like original Dell Pro, the rugged stuff. And then XPS would basically be like in between a Dell and a Dell, like right here in the middle of these two. The issue with that, and the kind of reason that I say it's a marketing thing, is because they also have three monikers under here. They say the Dell line is stuff for, basic things, which would be like the base, the plus, and the premium. And then you have the professional grade activities. You could say it like something like the XPS for that, or the Dell Pro, and those are three categories as well. And then maximum performance, this is like, hey, what happens if we took this but we cranked it? And that would be these ones. The biggest problem is that how do you compare a Dell, like a Dell Plus, which is this one? How do you compare a Dell Plus to a Dell Pro base, right? How do you compare a Dell Pro Premium to a Dell Pro Max base? What are the sort of stepping stones? Is it a ladder, or are they comparable, or are they not comparable? And once you kind of figure out what that is, you then have to say, okay, how does that compare to an XPS 16? How does that compare to a Latitude or an Inspiron? And that's where you get this thing where I originally said there's no way that they can't have a comparison of some kind. So I looked up on the Dell's website, and they do have a comparison of some kind. If you can see here, here's three models. We have the new Dell Pro 16 Plus. Reminder on the chart here, Dell Pro 16 is the size of the screen, and that is Plus, so that is in the middle here of the two options. So it's not a base, it's not a premium, it's a Plus. Dell Pro 16 Plus, and as you saw from the pricing here, that's about $1,700. $1,700 is about what I would say is the average price for something like an Ultrabook, right? So theoretically, this would compete with like the XPS 16 if you were trying to compare them. And then you have the Latitude, in this case is a 2-in-1. So like Latitude was a little bit more of a basic brand compared to XPS. You typically see Latitudes being a little bit bigger, a little bit more utility focused. And in this case, you'd also see them have things like 2-in-1s, touchscreens, where a lot of the other models like the XPS might not have that. As you can see, however, this new Latitude model, which is a similar price to this one, doesn't look like that. If I can check out the ports, you can, like Latitude used to be like, hey, you have a bunch of ports. It doesn't look like you have a bunch of ports now. You have an HDMI, you have a USB-C, you have a USB-C, and I think that's it. We don't see the other side. Can I have a 360? Yes, 360. Thank you. Give it to me. And two USB-As, a power, and a headphone jack, or maybe like a Kensington lock or something. But that seems like a pretty decent amount of ports, right? This was always the utility focus. What just happened? Where did it go? Okay. Yeah, it's like a utility focus. Was the Latitude. XPS was more like Ultrabook focused, work focused, speed, convenience, right? That kind of thing. But $1,700 was kind of like the starting price of this. If I'm trying to compare these, the Dell, the Latitude, the previous XPS 14 model, which starts a little bit cheaper, and for some reason, Dell's modeling thing here puts the XPS 16, it's gone now, but it did put the XPS 16 on a systems level for some reason. But functionally, let's just look at this, right? It even tells us, if we're trying to compare it, that it might not be possible with this reminder here. The specifications listed on this page may vary between models and not apply to all models. This basically tells you you're not going to be able to compare these directly. If you want to try and compare them directly, you're going to fail, which just feels ridiculous because the entire point of this system is to make it easier. And right now, it's not easier. So let's take the 16 Pro at $1,700. How does it compare to the Latitude, right? They're similar prices. What's the difference? We have a Ultra 5 236V V Pro. V Pro is the Intel Professional series. Typically speaking, that allows you to enable stuff like hypervirtualization if it's not enabled by default. It allows you to do some other things relating to hyper-threading and just unlock some of that. Usually this is pretty useless in terms of actually affecting things that most people need to do. It is useful if you're trying to do a lot of compiling, or if you're trying to do like 3D rendering, I believe, can benefit from this. Simulation work also maybe. There's a couple things you can look up, but I'm pretty sure it's mostly anything relating to like simulation and multi-threading stuff. But as you can see, this other one here just gets a basic 125 view. So you could basically determine from this that this is using the previous 155 options, and these are using the more current 200 series. So more current compared to these two over here, but it doesn't really give you a good idea of what the necessary benefit of that is. Because as you can see, this is 8 megabytes of cache. This is 12 megabytes of cache. This is 12 cores. This is 8 cores. So you may say, okay, it seems like it's a higher number, right? 236 versus 125. But the 125 actually has more cache, which relates to how quickly it can do processes, and it has more cores. And yet the Dell Pro is more expensive. So then you kind of figure, okay, so it seems like this one on the left is better, right? It seems like it has a higher of this, the V Pro and all that, and it's more expensive. But it actually doesn't seem like it's that better because it has less megabyte cache, like the L1, L2 cache, and it has less cores. And it even, it turbos a little bit higher, as you can see here. But, there's not that context you need to understand necessarily from this comparison here, which is better. To me, looking at this without doing research into the different chips, it looks like this one is better, even if it is the generation before it, because of that higher core count, right? Go down to the next thing. By default, this comes with Windows 11 Pro and Pro Copilot. This one also comes with Windows 11 Pro, but you can have Windows 11 Home. And Ubuntu for Linux for some reason if you want. Check down to graphics. It's like, okay, maybe the 16 Pro Plus, Dell Pro 16 Plus, maybe this one has graphics that maybe are better because it's trying to be that business focused. Remember, back to our chart, designed for professional grade productivity. It has an integrated ARC graphics 236V processor. This is integrated Intel graphics vPro processor. These ARC is supposed to be better, so you could say that this has a better GPU. But if you go up here, you can also see that you do get ARC graphics on the higher end model here, and you actually seemingly get better ARC graphics, or maybe the same. This looks to be about the same right here. This last model with the integrated ARC graphics looks to be this model here. If anything, I would argue that this Latitude model is actually a better option because you're not forced with this one type of graphics options. You have a lot of different options. And if you want to have that high end, you can. So that's just, food for thought there. It's like, hey, this might be better, but you have more options here. Going down, same amount of RAM stuff. This Pro Plus new model does have considerably higher mega transfers, although it is arguable, especially at these speeds, what that's actually doing and benefiting for you. But that is an advantage, so, one for that. Storage capacity looks to be about the same on each one, using the same style, using the same generation. This one allows you to get 2 terabytes though, so if you need more SSD space, gotta go with the Latitude. Displays. You would think, okay, maybe you have less options on the Pro model because they're trying to factor it into like one specific person, like one specific idea for like, the Asus models might be focused on like, professional art. The Dell models might be focused on, hey, let's do simulation work or let's do photography. Doesn't look so like that. So now you have a kind of a concern of like, okay, who is this actually for? Because on, as I said, the other models, you have people that are very specific. You have, so if I do like the Asus ProArt, I don't remember what laptop model, but like the ProArt laptops from Asus here are specifically designed for color accuracy and photo editing, right? Like photo editing, color accuracy, that kind of thing. They're considerably expensive, but they have things that are dedicated to that. they have that 3K OLED 16:10 display. They have the dial pad. They have the kind of smaller escape here. They have it in black. And so they're trying to basically make this a extremely color accurate, vibrant display for color accurate photo editing and artwork. The Dell here doesn't seem like it has that. There's nothing in this system here that seems like it is geared towards anyone. And as you know, a reminder, it says it's supposed to be geared towards professionals. And the Dell Pro Max is supposed to be geared towards even bigger professionals, whatever that means. But it doesn't seem like anything here in the specs is that. Why would I get a 16 Plus, right? This is the middle model here, when it doesn't look like it's that much better in any capacity than the previous generation Latitude, and it's, you know, what, $80 more? And this also, the Latitude's a 2-in-1, so if you wanted to use it as a tablet, you could, and you can't with this one. It's just, it becomes hard, and the reason I say it's marketing related is because this is all marketing. It's on the marketing people to effectively create this comparison tool. The engineers don't really care, right? They're just making the products and all that. The marketing team really needs a comparison tool that showcases why I'd get the new product versus the old product. And right now, there is no reason that I would get this product compared to the Latitude. If you look at the specs, you're like, okay, well, less processor options and also potentially lower cores. Same options for that. Same options and even more options for graphics cards. Same basically options for RAM. More options for storage if you want a 2 terabyte. You don't get that on the new model. Displays, way more options for displays, which can get a little confusing, obviously. But let's see, non-touch, 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 touch. There's one touch model, and there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 touch models here, with a lot larger variety. So we have the displays, you know, standard 1920 by 1200, 60 hertz, and then we have a 120 IPS and a 60 hertz IPS that looks to be include an IR camera for some reason. That's kind of odd. And then we go to this Latitude, and we have user-friendly things, right? We have the standard here with all this stuff, and that comes in a couple of different varieties. And then we have down here, it's 2560 by 1600, so if you want something with higher density, you can get that. And then there's other things, right? You have touch 400 watt with the camera as well. You have an OLED option. And so it looks like if you just go through this list, there's a lot of problems when it comes to comparing these two laptops. And that's where I say the naming scheme of this is ridiculous, because this naming scheme doesn't tell you what advantage it has over this one, nor does it tell you even that it's a better version of this one. So that's the first one, is Dell. And I would recommend, generally, if you're trying to look for things like this, go with the previous XPS or Latitude version until they actually prove via benchmarks or something that these new laptops are better. The second company that is doing this is this hellscape of a name that is AMD's new AI mobile chips. It's broken down here relatively concisely, I think, and it's this. You got the brand. Let's put this in like green. You got the brand right there. You got the brand level. In this case, the brand has kind of extended to use this stupid AI chunk. You have brand level. 9HX is a pretty common indicator for mobile. So it's like 9 standard HX is usually the mobile thing. And then the series, which they decided to add, because it used to just be AMD Ryzen 9 900HX. That was it. Now it's AMD Ryzen AI 9 HX 370. You added the AI, you kept the 9HX, but then you added an extra moniker for whatever reason. And it's not even like that extra moniker does a ton. That 370 isn't going to change a ton because there's only 370 options available right now. If we go Ryzen 9 HX 370, this thing, you'll see that there's only 370. If we just go like general branding, what do we got? So we have 370, 370. We have the older models, 370, 370. I didn't pick 370. I didn't say, you know, hey, look at this, but this is like the only one we're getting is this 370. There's a 370 and there's a 365, and the 365 is worse, and I don't even think the 365 is out. 365, this one, for Premium AI PCs. Do we know which ones those are, though? Is a 10-core... Do we know what laptops they are in? See, you have to do all this information. You're trying to find it. You're like, what laptops have this information in it? Let's actually figure out. Does this one have it? AI 365, it does. All right, so let's check this one. This is a VivoBook. Has the new Ryzen 9 AI stuff in it. It's about 1,300. Do we have anyone else except ASUS that is doing this? We have this one from MSI. These look to be creator-specific laptops, right? This is MSI Prestige line, which is their creator line. VivoBook is typically not a creator line, but they're using basically in the same setup. So one thing that happened with Intel when they switched kind of their monikers around with the Intel Ultra line is that the Intel Ultra, as you saw here, right, for these things, that was their more efficient laptop line. And what was nice about this, even if the naming scheme was confusing, is because it was a very big departure from their previous modeling scheme. So you knew that these were supposed to be efficient laptop chips, and that later on they would become more power hungry, but you would know that this is the efficient line. The Ultra 7 165H, I believe, was the standard 15th gen, basically, Intel chip. It's very hard to figure out now what Ryzen's and AMD's kind of goal is for this, because you have a VivoBook, which is known to be a kind of like basic consumer, just general going about, I guess commuter is the word, laptop, and it has this chip in it. But then you have something like the MSI Prestige, which is more focused on creators, and that also has the chip in it. And it's not using this, Prestige, what would be seen as a like creator-focused laptop, doesn't have the more high-end chip, it has the lower-end chip. So it always becomes confusing of, like, typically speaking, your lesser-end models get the lesser-end chips, and the higher-end models get the higher-end chips. And in this scenario, you don't have that. You have a consumer commuter version having the same chip as a more expensive version. Obviously, these are different companies, but typically speaking, you try and make it so that it's very easy to understand what is this CPU good for, right? You take a look at like the old Intel i5 3600K. You knew that this was a really great CPU desktop-wise, but it wasn't as good necessarily as a i7. You did, however, know that most computers that ran this in a laptop were going to be very good options, generally speaking. You did not need to worry that basically the different laptop options had this. You just knew that this was going to be good, and you knew that anything above that was even better. You don't have that anymore with this kind of setup, right? You have companies like ASUS being very specific sometimes, saying, hey, this is our pro artist-focused laptop with this specific chipset in it and these specific specs. And then you have other companies like Dell just kind of going all over the place. And so that's also another reason why these things have become so confusing, is because you don't have a clear understanding of where these chips fall in line. And I think the way you fix that is you have to get a base understanding at some point about what is seen as good. For example, the Ultra 7 165H, if you look at reviews and stuff, is generally speaking a pretty good chip for most laptops. Everything else has to then compare to it. If it's worse than it, you have to say, okay, it's probably not. It's probably in a weaker laptop, right? And maybe I don't need power, but maybe I do need power. Maybe I want something that's stronger than this, so I'm going to look for the higher end model. It becomes confusing when they start adding new generations that actually are used for different things, which is why it's so annoying that the other thing I showed, the Ryzen one, it's why this is so annoying, is because it breaks that down. It says, don't worry about the thing you started figuring out. We just changed all of it, which is really ridiculous. And so my advice for that is, again, check and make sure that get a baseline, right? If your baseline is the 165H, figure out what that is, what it's good for, all that, what it has, and then you can start comparing things to it. Because if you don't have a baseline, you'll never be able to understand what's happening. Hopefully that made sense. Hopefully it wasn't too rambly. If you like this kind of stuff, you want to see more tech reviews, tech retrospectives, design discussions, anything like that, subscribe to the main Mac Gibbs channel, subscribe to the sequel channel, second channel for gaming content, and I'll see everyone in the next video.